America began a dramatic change in the early 1800s stemming from the increasing technology of transportation. This proved to have a dramatic impact on American life. No longer did it take weeks to travel. Transportation allowed for increased import and export of goods and services, in which turn pushed America to become more independent. More jobs were created, and unskilled workers were trained and able to make a living. Foreign culture was able to flourish throughout America, which people were unaware of previously. The ease of transportation now allowed American settlers to move further west. Industry and agriculture, which was moving slowly, not began to boom. More territory was being claimed and America was growing. For all the positive impacts of these innovations, there were also many drawbacks. Many people died during construction, and many of the unskilled workers were killed and their bodies never claimed. The long hours and laborious work led to the bad habits with many of the workers. Although the advantages of surpassed the disadvantages, the innovation of transportation definitely had a profound effect to American life. In the early 1800s, steamboats and canals were being constructed and seemed to be the new wave of the future to complement stagecoaches and regular roads. Although stagecoaches were an effective means of transportation at that time, the amount of time and limited space available was no match to the more effective means, the steamboat. Where the waterways could not reach, the stagecoach was still used, but the preferred method of travel was now the steamboat. It helped for America's expansion westward. It also opened up a large number of jobs for skilled and unskilled workers. Many young boys left home to work on the construction of steamboats and digging of canals in hopes of making money and earning job training. The drawback to the steamboats was their inability to function during the winter months. The canals and waterways would freeze over the boats and would be out of commission. This was also a problem to the stagecoaches. This was immensely difficult to travel in the extreme cold and snow. So, for a few months out of every year, the travel would cease and nothing could be done. So the ability to move goods, money, mail, or any other service would either stop or take a large amount of time and money. This affected the people selling the merchandise and receiving the merchandise. During periods of no rain, the canals and waters would get so low that boats could not operate. People would be stranded wherever the boat stopped and functioning, and goods would be stuck and accumulate on the banks. The boat owners and the workers were also adversely affected. Many of the workers that were out of work for those months were also out of money, shelter, and food. Owners did not provide for their workers during these months. Along the canals, this affected many people. The unsheltered workers were stealing from the neighboring farms for food and shelter. Many workers were drinking enormously, causing scenes and fighting. The little bit of money they did have or were able to save would go to alcohol. Many travelers of the steamboats also suffered many adverse consequences. Families traveling would use all their funds for the travel and become stranded in foreign cities and have to sustain many terrible conditions. Because of these months where communication was slowed almost to a stop, a more effective means of transportation was needed to further the expansion of America. That's when the new and improved means of travel rose, the railroad. After the invention of the steamboat came a more effective means of travel, the railroad. The railroads not only offered a more effective means of travel, but the cost of travel was also cheaper. No longer did the winter months pose a threat to the transportation system. The railroads functioned efficiently all year long. This helped the growth of the westward expansion. Railroads were built to travel across the country and increase the trade between the east and the west, with railroads becoming the preferred method of travel over stagecoaches and steamboats. They were cropping up everywhere. Again, the demand for workers to build the railroads increased. Unskilled workers had another chance to earn a living. Manufacturing boomed because the cost to transport their goods had decreased. along with the travel time. Perishable items that were unable to stand long travel times were now able to be transported due to the safety and small travel time. The wet atmosphere on boats made it impossible for some items to make it through travel. Agriculture was now able to flourish because farmers could move their product quickly, which allowed them to make more of their product. This, along with the cheaper cost of travel, allowed them to sell at a cheaper rate. This helped to boost the growth of the agriculture industry. Mail travel also moved from stagecoaches to railroads, decreasing the time to send and receive mail. The introduction of new modes of transportation also opened up America to communication across the nation. Now that the railroads linked the East and the West, communication between both areas increased. Cultural differences were now seen and heard about. Foods and religious practices also traveled across America. These communication lines were otherwise unrealistic without the railroads. During the early 19th century, many changes were made to American life. It was the beginning of Industrial Revolution, and the spark in transportation innovation fueled the revolution. The introduction of steamboats and stagecoaches began America on its path to expansion. Turnpikes and roadways all allowed for the travel and provided jobs to a growing economy. And with the growth of the economy came the growth of education. Now that railroads were being built, trade and commerce increased. The link of communication between the East and West and interstate trade was now easily accessible, and the cost of building railroads was much cheaper than the cost of steamboats and canals. Transportation was a key factor in the booming of industry and agriculture in the early 1800s. Technological increases in transportation affected the lives of unskilled, poor workers up to the boat owners, farm owners, and railroad owners. It changed America for the better and allowed for the growth of the economy and the westward expansion.